It was still dark when he arrived. No crowds, no cameras, no fanfare, just the cold hum of fluorescent lights and the sound of old boots on tile. He moved slowly, not out of age, but out of injury. Every step measured, like a soldier walking into memory. A soft tan jacket, a worn leather duffel, a limp that told a story no one had asked to hear. He had a ticket, a boarding pass marked 14C, not just a seat, a choice made months ago. So an old war injury wouldn't lock up in midair. But what he didn't know was that his seat was about to become something far bigger than comfort. It would become a battleground of dignity, a quiet test of who we are when no one's looking, because some battles don't end when the uniform comes off. They just change shape. And this one, it would take place at 30,000 feet. This is the story of a man who gave more than his country ever asked, and how a single seat revealed everything about how we treat those who have already given everything. It all started with a question. "Sir, I need you to move." In the early hours of a cold Denver morning, the airport was bathed in that eerie pre-dawn light. Everything felt still. Security lines moved with sleepy silence. Gate announcements echoed like whispers across the vast terminal. And there, sitting quietly at Gate 27, was a man who didn't quite belong to this time. Frank Delaney, 78 years old, retired United States Marine Corps Staff Sergeant, Vietnam veteran. His jacket was simple, his hands weathered, his posture upright, steady, and disciplined. But it was the limp, subtle but unmistakable, that told the real story. A left knee that never quite healed, not from age but from shrapnel from war. Frank wasn't heading off to war this time. He was flying from Rock Springs, Wyoming to Annapolis, Maryland. His granddaughter, his pride, was graduating from the U.S. Naval Academy, first in the family to wear the uniform after him. He'd booked this flight 3 months in advance. Out of his fixed income, he paid extra for seat 14C, an aisle seat, premium economy, not for comfort, but for survival. He needed that seat for his leg, for the pain, for the dignity of making it through a 5-hour flight without ending up in an ER. He boarded early. No fuss, no noise, just a quiet thank you to the gate agent and a careful hand on the railing as he walked down the jet bridge. When he reached his seat, he lowered himself slowly, stowed his worn duffel beneath the seat in front of him, and finally exhaled. For a moment all was calm, until a few rows ahead a hand shot up. A woman, sharp uniform, tablet in hand, smile rehearsed. Her name tag read Kayla. She walked straight to Frank's row. "Excuse me, sir, are you in seat 14C?" "Yes, ma'am," Frank answered, polite and firm. "We have a family that got separated during booking," she said. "A mother with 2 young children. Your seat, along with the 2 beside it, is the only spot where they can sit together." Frank paused, brow furrowed. "I booked this seat months ago," he said. "Medical reasons, combat injury." Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes shifted. "I understand, sir, but if you don't move, we can't close the doors." That was it, the pressure, the quiet judgment, the unspoken implication: be the problem or be the solution. Frank looked around. The cabin had gone quiet. People were watching. To them, he was just another obstacle, an old man in the way of a family with kids. A selfish passenger, a delay. He didn't argue, he didn't protest. He just looked up and said, "Name S. Frank Delaney, Staff Sergeant, United States Marine Corps, retired. I'd like it noted that I gave up a medically necessary seat under pressure." And with that he stood, slowly, painfully. He picked up his bag and walked down the aisle. To seat 32B, it was exactly what he imagined. Tight, cramped. Middle seat. No room to stretch. No air to breathe. Wedged between a college kid with headphones and a businessman claiming both armrests like territory. The overhead light was broken. The air smelled of stale coffee and cleaning spray. His knee screamed every time he shifted, but no one noticed. No one cared, no one even looked except one person, 3 rows ahead across the aisle. Charlotte Hayes, 43, consultant, daughter of a sailor, and someone who knew exactly what she had just witnessed. She didn't record a video. She didn't shout. She simply pulled out her phone and sent a single message. Passenger Frank Delaney, forced from confirmed seat 14C. Medical need ignored. Crew dismissive. Please escalate. She hit send, set the phone down, and waited. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive loudly, sometimes it takes off in silence. 3 minutes later, the cockpit door opened, and everything was about to change. The cabin quieted as Frank sank into seat 1A, leather cool against his back. More space than he knew what to do with. But even with his legs finally stretched, his mind didn't relax. His body had left 32B, but something in him was still there, stuck. A sound stirred in his memory. Rain, not the polite patter of city drizzle, but the kind of rain that soaked through bones. Khe Sanh, Vietnam. February 1968. Frank was 21 and bleeding. He remembered the stink of fuel and fire, a jungle road swallowed in smoke, and the screams, not of fear, but of men still alive inside a burning truck. 6 in the back. Someone shouted, but no one moved. The vehicle was half engulfed in flames. Rounds inside started popping, ammunition cooking off. 1 more second and the whole thing would be gone. Frank didn't wait, didn't think. He charged through the curtain of smoke, his knee already torn open by shrapnel from the first hit. He dragged one man, then another, and when his leg gave out, he crawled. He didn't remember the last pull, only the sound behind him, a crack of fire meeting fuel, and the world going white. They said later he saved 6 men that night, but the paperwork got buried. The fog of war, they called it. He never chased the medals. He just carried the scars. 40 years later, he still couldn't kneel without pain. But no one saw that in seat assignments. No checkbox for old ghosts. No drop-down menu for sacrifices made in the dark. She sat 2 rows behind, still watching him, still remembering another man in uniform. Her father, he'd served in Operation Desert Storm, quietly, fiercely, until he came home to silence. A silence so heavy it broke the dinner table in half, not with sound, but with absence. She was 12 when he stopped showing up to breakfast, 15 when the VA finally diagnosed the depression, 17 when she found him sitting on the floor of the garage, photos in his lap, tears on his cheeks, and by 22 he was gone, Not from war, from being forgotten. That's why she sent the message, because she knew the signs. She knew the danger of disappearing in plain sight. Corporal Reeves had been close, too close. He'd written the note, locked the door, sat with a loaded pistol and a photo of his unit. Kandahar 2006. PTSD had clawed through his mind like shrapnel no surgeon could reach. And just as he was ready to fall, "You decent Marine." Reeves didn't answer. Frank didn't wait. He walked in, sat down, didn't say anything at first. Just took off his cap, set it on the bunk, and waited. "I've been there," Frank finally said. "The jungle version of this, the screams stay, the guilt sticks. But this." He tapped the barrel. "This doesn't fix it, it just ends it." He didn't give a speech, he gave company. And that night Reeves put the gun down, years later on that same flight. That same broken man sat 3 rows behind Frank, now healed enough to travel, to live. And the moment he saw Frank limping toward 1A, the years folded in. "You saved my life," he said, his voice cracked. "We never got to thank you." Frank didn't cry, but something in him shifted. For the first time in a long time, he was seen, not as a number, not as a seat assignment, but as someone who had carried weight no civilian would ever read in a resume. And then there was Shadow, the one being Frank trusted when no humans could reach him. A Belgian Malinois, trained for combat zones, but gifted for something deeper. Emotional detection. Where orders failed, instincts worked. Shadow wasn't just a dog. He was a mirror. When Frank's hands trembled, Shadow would lean closer. When the nightmares came, the dog would paw his chest until he woke. Shadow never spoke, but he always knew. That's why, for many veterans, dogs aren't pets. They're weapons against the final enemy, silence, when pills can't reach the grief, and therapy fails to translate memory. A dog does what no system can. He listens. And sometimes that's enough to save a life. Frank had walked through fire. Not just in Khe Sanh, not just in Kandahar, but in grocery store lines. On forgotten birthdays. On nights when no one called. A quiet war that never made the papers, but it was real. Like Jason Redman once said, "The hardest battlefield is the one inside your own head. But if you lead yourself, others will follow." Frank never tried to lead. He just kept standing. And because he did, others found the courage to keep walking too. Back in the cabin, something had shifted. Not the altitude, the atmosphere. Even the businessman beside him had stopped typing. Even the college kid now sat with his hands folded, respectful. Charlotte looked at her screen, then closed the laptop. Some stories didn't need a keyboard, just silence. The kind that means something. Seat 1A wasn't just more legroom, it was restitution. For what he gave, for what he lost, for what he carried. And the flight hadn't even left the ground, because what came next wasn't just about a seat, it was about a voice. A microphone, a captain, and a cabin full of strangers who were about to learn the weight of silence. He didn't ask for recognition, didn't seek medals or parades. He simply wanted to make it to his granddaughter's graduation, without his knee locking up in pain. But what he got instead was something deeper. A reminder that no matter how much time passes, respect isn't something that expires. Frank Delaney went to sleep that night, not just as a veteran, but as a man who had been seen, truly seen, by a stranger, by a captain, by a nation that for a moment remembered what it meant to honor its own. So maybe the real question isn't about policy, or seat assignments, or airline rules. Maybe it's this: how many Frank Delaney's have we walked past without ever stopping to ask, "Are you okay?" Because sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest stories, and sometimes a seat becomes sacred, not because of its price, but because of the man who once sat in it. If this story moved you, share, talk about let someone know they matter before the world forgets to look. And tell us in the comments, have you ever seen someone give up something just because it was the right thing to do?